Let me just begin by saying this, that the legal landscape that we're dealing with in relation to men's rights is extremely uneven. It is extremely uneven. We are fighting a very lopsided battle, to be honest. All the laws are extremely in favor, they are highly in favor of the women. Very recently, there was this Atul Subhash case. Just a couple of days back, there was another case which has taken place in the national capital.
Yeah, in Delhi.
That was, I think, Mr. Pune, who has taken his own life, who's recorded a 50-minute video and highlighted the torture that he was undergoing, same like what Atul Subhash has done. I remember when there was a scene in the court, this had just happened very recently in the Jodhpur court, where my client told the judge that there was a certain block of shares which I had left for my ex-wife. And the ex-wife did make a statement that I sold those shares during the markets, when the markets were on a high. And that point of time, the judge quipped that अभी तो आपको रिमेन वो तो पैसा खत्म हो गया, आपको वो पैसा देना पड़ेगा और पैसा देना पड़ेगा. This is the attitude, and the client was so upset. He finally yelled out in open court that I am not an ATM machine. There was this boy who was graduated from a premier institute in Bombay. He's done his MBA from there. He was in a relationship, he was in a steady relationship with a girl who was elder to him, almost 3-4 years, who already had a daughter from the previous marriage.
Okay.
So the two of them, they were in a romantic relationship, and one fine day, my client asked her for marriage, which she agreed to. 3 months later, he gets he has police at his doorstep, and he's totally flabbergasted. He just doesn't understand what's happened. He has police at his doorstep, and the next thing the police tell him that you are under arrest. This girl has filed a case against you for rape.
So welcome to yet another exciting episode of Dr. AB's Podium. आज का टॉपिक थोड़ा सा सेंसिटिव है. मैंने 2 एपिसोड्स पहले मैंने एक डिस्कशन किया था विद रिगार्ड्स टू पॉश, which is a law for creating better workspaces for women and of course for other genders as well. But आज मैं थोड़ा सा अलग डिस्कशन करने वाला हूँ. Today I'm going to talk about what is the legal framework in India and how is it that the legal framework in India is for the men. Because पिछले साल में कई सारे केसेस हमने देखे जो हाईलाइट हुए सोशल मीडिया पे, एंड देन दिस टॉपिक अबाउट हाउ द लॉ सपोर्ट्स द इंडियन मैन, एंड जहाँ पे अगर फेक केसेस किसी के ऊपर होते हैं तो क्या होता है, एंड व्हाट काइंड ऑफ रेमेडीज और व्हाट काइंड ऑफ रिकोर्सेज आर अवेलेबल फॉर मेन इन दोज केसेस. This discussion that I'm going to have is not to create any kind of judgment. It is just to have an idea कि अगर किसी के साथ में ये फेक केसेस होते हैं तो उनके लिए रेमेडीज क्या होनी चाहिए. To discuss this, I have Advocate Harshwardhan Akolkar with me. He is a childhood friend of mine. We have been together in school. एक जमाना था जो हम लोग के लिए अलग benches लगवाए जाते थे because we are tall people. And today I am really happy that I am sharing this professional space with him on this podcast. Welcome Harshwardhan.
Thank you, Aditya.
So to begin with, I would just like to know, you completed your law degree in 2009. You started your practice in 2009. So how was it back in 2009, and from 2009 to now in 2025, how things have changed? What are your experiences that have been there in the last all these years?
So Aditya, I graduated in the year 2009, and I initially worked with the Office of the Prosecutor. I was attached to that office and I was doing a lot of prosecution work just to get a feel of how the prosecution works and how do they lay their strategies. That is where I began my work. After 2009 to 2011, I was there. After 2011, I shifted over to the defense. I was working largely in the Prevention of Corruption Act side. I did a lot of matters under that particular law. After that, I moved to Bombay in the year 2013, and I did a lot of work on death penalty abolition. I did a lot of custodial death matters. I did a lot of human rights work. After that, in the year 2017-18, I moved to Geneva. I did my master's in international law. And from 2019 to 2021, I was in the Netherlands. I was working at the United Nations. I was working at the IRMCT, that is the Residual Mechanisms for Criminal Tribunals. And I was working at the ICTY, that is the Criminal Tribunal for former Yugoslavia. So over there, I was working on the war crimes, on the war trials of the chief of intelligence, and I was working on that.
Okay.
And also someone who was the president of the former Czechoslovakia. So I was working on that, and after 2020, when I came back to India during the COVID period, I got back to Bombay and I started my work. To tell you very frankly, the work has changed a lot after 2020, that is after the COVID times. Work has slowed down a lot, to be very honest.
Okay.
It has slowed down a lot. Because there has been a lot of cases, there have been a lot of cases that have been pending. The courts were practically not working for a lot of time. So that is what has caused this backlog. But here we are back to working and we are doing our best to clear the backlog.
Right, right. So I'll just give you some references here. We are talking about men's rights and how the law is there to support men against whom probably false cases have been filed. So 2012, there was one particular case which was filed against an actor, a Bollywood actor and his wife, where of course it was a false case. Then in 2018, there was a case which was filed against one of the cricketers from our Indian team. Again, there was one more case in 2010, which was against a television actor. And also in 2018, there was a case which was filed against one of the famous television and film actors. Now, if you see, these are just probably 5 or 6 of the cases which I have highlighted or I have named. But there are countless such kind of cases. When I discussed this about the POSH Act, I came to know that if suppose there are 100 cases which are filed, probably 3 to 4% of them are fake cases. Now, it may not look like a big number, but in a population of 150 crores, that number could be huge. So, if suppose this kind of a case happens, first, how does a man accept it, and how does a man really now start looking at it as to face it or seek a remedy in that case?
Aditya, to be honest, it's very traumatic, especially when you are embroiled in false cases. It is extremely traumatic for the concerned man. Let me just begin by saying this, that the legal landscape that we're dealing with in relation to men's rights is extremely uneven. It is extremely uneven. We are fighting a very lopsided battle, to be honest. All the laws are extremely in favor, they are highly in favor of the women. And that is what has been happening. Very recently, there was this Atul Subhash case. Just a couple of days back, there was another case which has taken place in the national capital.
Yeah, in Delhi.
That was, I think, Mr. Puneet, who has taken his own life, who's recorded a 50-minute video and highlighted the torture that he was undergoing, same like what Atul Subhash has done. The cases that you have named, I'm not quite sure which of the cases they are, but I think, like you mentioned, if they have been exonerated, they've been amongst the luckier ones. That's number one. Number two, we are dealing with just the tip of the iceberg. There are thousands and thousands of cases where men have been, put behind bars. They have been, castigated. They have been charged with offences for which they have, which they haven't even committed. And I'll share through my personal experiences, because I'm dealing with a lot of these matters nowadays. I'm dealing with a lot of family court matters. And over there, I've realized one thing, that there is also a lot of judicial bias against men, which is highly prevalent nowadays. That is something that is turning the tide against men. And this has to be changed. There are a number of reforms that need to be brought. Because at the end of the day, one has to realize that men can be equally vulnerable. They are stigmatized many a times. Some people can be resolute enough to continue with that battle. Atul Subhash and Puneet, they have not been so resolute. They were the unfortunate ones who have taken their life. But you also have to realize that a point comes when somebody just gives up on the entire battle. And that is what is now happening, And there are many more, I'm quite sure there are many more who have taken their lives. It's just that the media has not highlighted their cases.
Correct. I'll come to the point where we spoke about how somebody can stick to it and not give up. I'll come to that point a little later. There have been television advertisements which say men will be men. And why I'm saying this is because in case of family matters, when there is a case, for example, if there is a case of giving the custody of the child, the first allegation that probably could be put onto a man is about addictions. It could be true, it may not be true. So how does somebody really come out of these social stigmas that have been put onto men, and how do we make people aware of this?
See, to begin off with, it has to be a very equal play field for both the man and for the woman. Stigma is one thing. They can always seek counseling from outside. I'll start with the first counseling part, and then I'll later go to your question about the child custody. They can seek counseling. There are a number of institutions which are offering help to men. They can definitely go there, they can seek help, and then maybe, come back to the court, ask for child custody. In child custody cases, my experience has been it is very lopsided for the simple reason it generally goes to the woman, the custody of the child, for whatever reason, for whatever reason. But one has to be a little more balanced. We have to be a little more even-handed when it comes to the child custody. The way I look at it is the person who is doing better is more capable of looking after the child's welfare should be given the custody. However, that does not really happen. That doesn't happen very often in India. The child custody generally goes to the mother unless and until the child is 18 years old where he has his own say. If he's 18 years old, he'll have his say. He can always say that I want to go and stay with my father. Or he may say that, I wish to go and stay with my mother. That is fine. But children who are not majors, in that case, custody is generally given to the mother. That is the other thing.
Right. Now I'll give you another few examples over here. Again, these are related to family cases itself. Again, this was one case where there was a case of domestic violence which was filed against the person. Now the list that I have here, about 4 or 5 of them, commonly have the same thing. There's a case of domestic violence which has been filed, and then there has been some kind of a mechanism where there is making maybe collecting more alimony or getting more of those divorce proceedings. In those cases, how does somebody handle it?
When you go to a divorce lawyer, the divorce lawyer nowadays, he gives you a package. What lawyers call a package in today's parlance. You file divorce proceedings, you file domestic violence proceedings, you file charges under the IPC, that is now the BNSS, Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita. You file all these cases, and if the lady is even more, she can dare, if she can step out, she can say she can even file cases of unnatural sex. That is something that has taken, that is trending in India. The legal industry, this particular family court industry has become a cottage industry in itself.
Okay.
That's the whole thing. The number of false cases that have been filed against men today are on the rise. And there are a number of reasons to it. Generally, when we go before the court, we often come across that all the charges are highly, highly exaggerated. See, frivolous wear and tear is bound to happen. But when you tend to make a mountain of a molehill, you end up making so many allegations, and these allegations typically stick before the court. And the court has its own biases.
Right.
And coming out of those biases takes a very long time. We are, like as I said in the beginning, we are already fighting a huge backlog of cases. So for a man to clear his name takes a lot of time. The other side to it is the courts, they are very, very reluctant to take action against the woman in case the woman is found lying on oath. That is another thing. So these checks, there are no checks, unfortunately. If a lady files a false affidavit, if she doesn't show her income just to get more alimony from the husband, in such a case, the courts are not even taking action against the women because they are making false affidavits. These are things which really need to be considered. These are very, very important things. Unfortunately, they are going unchecked, and that is why they are going undeterred. See, for any system or for any punishment, either ways, for the man or for the woman to work, there have to be 3 things. One has to be swiftness of punishment, one has to be severity of punishment, and one has to be certainty. If either one of the things fails, the entire system flops.
Correct.
And that is something that the women today are taking advantage of. That is something very important. And unfortunately, I don't see this trend dying down anytime soon. Like, to be honest, this was just about a month back. I was arguing a matter before the Jodhpur High Court. This is a classic case. The woman, she left the house on her own accord. She told her husband that I'm going to come back in a month's time. Once she reaches a matrimonial home, she tells her husband that I don't think I'm going to come back. There are many mistakes that you have made during the subsistence of this marriage. I want you to come here and apologize. The husband said, I'm not going to do that and I'm not going to come. One fine day, he gets a call from Jodhpur. And he gets a call, and the police officer informs him that there is a case that has been filed against you. A case has been filed against him under domestic violence law. under the BNSS. That time it was the IPC. And now subsequent alimony proceedings, maintenance proceedings under 125 Criminal Procedure Code have been filed. Now all these things have all come together. Now just look at the entire travesty of the whole thing. My client has to travel all the way from Bombay to Jodhpur on every date. He has been doing this for the last 3 years during the beginning of the investigation, after that to attend court proceedings, and frankly nothing else has been happening. There's nothing substantial that is really coming out of these court hearings.
And this has been going on for how many?
For the last 4 years.
4 years, okay.
For the last 4 years. At the same time, the court expects him that he should pay her alimony when he has to take leaves from his work. Ultimately, he is a salaried employee. I remember when there was a scene in the court, this had just happened very recently in the Jodhpur court, where my client told the judge that there was a certain block of shares which I had left for my ex-wife. And the ex-wife did make a statement that I sold those shares during the markets, when the markets were on a high. And that point of time, the judge quipped that अभी तो आपको remain वो तो पैसा खत्म हो गया, आपको वो पैसा देना पड़ेगा और पैसा देना पड़ेगा. This is the attitude, and the client was so upset. He finally yelled out in open court that I am not an ATM machine. This is something. These are the judicial biases that we have to fight, and fighting these judicial biases in itself takes enormous energy and time. This is just one episode. This is just one particular case I'm talking about. There are innumerable cases. Nowadays, I get so many inquiries from so many men and women, both. The smallest of the smallest of the skirmishes in the house have been given a different color. How do we safeguard ourselves? These are things on an everyday basis. If they start coming to the fore, and if these are things that come to the court every day, I believe it's a very difficult road ahead.
थोड़ा सा मैं थोड़ा digress करूंगा यहाँ पे कि since of course we are talking about the legal side and everything, but the fact that we have become too nuclear, probably earlier families used to be a little more connected. Maybe the parents, grandparents may not be staying together, but probably in the same city or maybe in the same vicinity. So, अगर problems होते भी थे, तो at least the families could have gone back to their parents. ठीक है, समझा बुझा के चीजें manage करके they were coming back and things were smooth. But because of the growing cities and because of the complexity of professions and everything, this is happening, increasing more.
See, Aditya, you literally hit the nail on its head. To be honest, in earlier times, when there were joint families, the husband and the wife, even if they had their own share of problems, they had a lot of family members with whom they could share their emotional burden with. Nowadays, every emotional burden is either placed on either of the spouses. That is one of the things. The life has become very fast, especially when you go to metros like Bombay. Life is extremely fast. You hardly have the time. In such things, all partners, either spouse, they're facing a lot of pressure from their workplaces. There are a lot of other tensions that these people face, and ultimately these are things that they come home and they start snowballing. And like as I said, now that we are having nuclear families, where there is no emotional burden that cannot be divided amongst other family members, it all comes and it ultimately falls on one person, which becomes too much for one person because he has to also deal with his emotional burdens, with his own set of prejudices, with his own set of problems. To add to that, you have another partner who is also taking that emotional burden. So, like you rightly said, this is a very big contributing factor.
Correct.
This is a very big contributing factor. Earlier, women weren't working. Nowadays, women are also working, which has given them a sense of independence, which is a very good thing. See, mind you, Aditya, let me tell you, I'm not one of those who will say and take the extreme end, that, the law has been misused, repeal certain laws. No, I'm not one of those. Historically, women have been subjugated, to violence.
True.
There was a time, but that context was different, that time was different, and laws are being brought into place. But, everything has to be done in moderation. Today, you're making laws which are taken to the other end of the spectrum. In such a case, where do men really find themselves? They find themselves exactly in the place where women were. And either thing does not work. The law has to be Correct. Either of the lopsided laws, they're never going to work in anyone's favor.
Right. Right. So when people are moving out of their hometowns, staying in metros, what kind of common legal problems do men really have to safeguard themselves against, say while commuting in a train, or while walking on the street, okay, or anywhere, in probably in the family or in open spaces when they are walking. Why I'm asking this is because there was a very famous case which we were discussing just before we started, and there was this young boy who has spent a substantial amount of his time in fighting that particular case, which was falsely put onto him, a minor altercation on the signal, on a traffic signal, and there was a case which was filed against him, and the media made a big frenzy out of it, and he suffered for a lot of time.
See, to be honest, we cannot really have those kind of safeguards in place for ourselves. The least what I can suggest or what I can say is that, try and keep your interactions minimal. Like I know you're talking about I think, Kaur case.
Yeah, Jaslin Kaur case. Yeah.
I think the gentleman, I think the person concerned was, he was a Swiggy driver or something of that sort. And he was charged with some offense, and then he had to spend almost a year or a year and a half. He was struggling fighting his own case. See, I mean, these are just totally unexpected cases. They come out of nowhere. To give you an example, just last week there was a case I was doing where a 21-year-old boy went and proposed another girl and just said that I love you. This girl, instead of repudiating his advances, she made a police complaint, and the police have actually charged him under certain laws. The boy was later arrested. Now, where do we find ourselves with all of this? How do we safeguard ourselves with all of this? This is the question what we need to ask ourselves. I mean, if you are just going to go and make a simple statement that, if you just go and speak about your personal emotions, and then if you're going to be charged for saying I love you, I mean, this is ridiculous, to be very honest. It is ridiculous. How do we safeguard ourselves against all of this?
And there was no history of any sort in this.
History. The boy, it seems the two of them, they were working in an office. They have been regularly, some kind of office. I think she was working as a sweeper or something, and the boy was also working in some other department. I'm not quite sure whether she was a sweeper. I think she was in the kitchen department or something of that sort. But whatever it is, I mean, little bit of history must have been there. But whatever it is, this action for going to the police station and filing a police complaint is uncalled for. At the most, the lady could have said, no, I do not share the same feelings for you. You can move on. And that's what the natural expectation is. And that is what the most natural expectation of this person must have been. But to find himself at the end of another charge for saying, I love you to anybody, is absolutely preposterous.
Right. Now, if suppose this happens with somebody, this happened with somebody, what would be the first step that he is expected to take in this case?
Consult a lawyer. When he consulted me, we sought bail. He's already out on bail. After he was granted bail, now we are waiting for the charge sheet to be filed. Once the charge sheet is filed, we'll go before.
So typically, in an ideal situation, how long does it take for the charge sheet to be filed?
Well, as per the law, it takes 90 days, but in some cases, it can take more than 90 days also for the charge sheets to be filed. In cases where the punishment is more than, 10 years, 90 days have been given.
And in this case, how long has it been?
It's just been, in fact, the incidents took place last week. Last week, this incidents took place. So the charge sheet should be filed anywhere. Now that he's been granted bail by the court, he was formally arrested, he was granted bail by the court. And then now he's out on bail, he's back to work. But then, now it's going to be a long struggle unless and until he gets an order from the court, exonerating him for, I mean, I don't even classify this to be an offense, and hopefully even the court should not classify this as an offense. If he can once he's exonerated, well and good. Otherwise, there are a number of people who are just fighting their cases for years together.
Now, I'll come to another part. There are a lot of cases, that happen, crime against women, right? And to the audience also, I'm saying this, that we do not want to create any kind of judgment here. Let's be very honest. If there is a crime against a woman, a man is found guilty, the strictest and the most, I mean, I don't have any words to say. Whatever the firm punishment has to be there, it has to be given, and it should be fast. It should be quick, no doubt about it. But if there is a fake case which has been filed against a man for with reference to committing a false crime against a woman, how should the person really now look forward to it, to dealing with it?
It's going to take a lot of time. That's what the problem is. It takes a lot of time. I'll just give you an example. There was this case that I'm currently dealing with. There was this boy who's graduated from a premier institute in Bombay. He's done his MBA from there. He was in a relationship. He was in a steady relationship with a girl who was elder to him by almost about 3-4 years, who already had a daughter from the previous marriage.
Okay.
So the two of them, they were in a romantic relationship, and one fine day, my client asked her for marriage, which she agreed to. 3 months later, he has police at his doorstep, and he's totally flabbergasted. He just doesn't understand what's happened. He has police at his doorstep, and the next thing the police tell him that you are under arrest. This girl has filed a case against you for rape. Now, the reality being, this girl was in a relationship with 3 other guys, and just before arrest, this boy, my client, had got to know that she was in a relationship with 3 other guys. That is why my client decided to call off the relationship. The next thing my client knows is that he is going to be arrested because police are there at his doorstep. Now, this incident took place in the year 2013.
Okay.
It is 2024, we are 10 years down the line, the case hasn't even started.
Oh God.
The girl, she remarried, now she's fled, she's in the UK. She's in the UK. So practically her chances of coming back to India, giving
Negligible.
testimony are very negligible,
Yeah.
To add to it, we have a lot of backlog in the courts. So that is another thing. So in such a case, where does the man stand? His only hope is clear his name. This
So
person,
he must be now what, 32?
he is close to 39, 40 years.
39, 40. Okay.
When this incident happened, he was 28. Now it's been almost since 2013, so I'm guessing he's around 40 years.
So the last maybe 10, 12 years,
10, 12 years.
his condition would have been miserable.
Miserable. This sword has been hanging on his head. His fate hangs in limbo. He doesn't know, though he is 100% sure. Even I'm sure, being his lawyer, that he'll definitely get acquitted. But the whole question is when. We all have a certain lifespan. We are not going to live till eternity.
True.
It doesn't make sense for him to be acquitted at the age of 70. It doesn't make sense. He has to be acquitted at the earliest. He's even lost his job because there are reference checks which every company does.
Correct.
And once there is a reference check, in the reference check, once the company gets to know that there is a rape case that is pending against you, practically no company is going to engage you. They're not going to engage with you, and they're not going to hire you. In such a case, where does the man go? He has to start with his own company. He has started his own firm. He's doing pretty well for himself. But these are the challenges. All you need to do is be resolute and fight your battle. That is the whole thing. And like as I said earlier, there is no swiftness. The swiftness condition in the 3 parameters I mentioned, severity, swiftness, and certainty. Even if one flops, the entire system fails. And that is exactly what is happening over here.
Right.
And we have examples galore. We have a lot of examples where men are frustrated, where they just come to the court. And again, like the last time I mentioned this matter before the court, I said, sir, this matter has been going on since the year 2013. But your client is on bail. Why are you worried? That is the attitude of the judges. Because they have got so many matters on their desk that they say, if you're on bail, wait, your turn will come. We've just started with other matters. And like as I said, there are so many judicial biases. There was a transfer petition I was arguing before the High Court. And in one of the High Court matters, a case that was heard before me, there was another case that was being heard before me. The judge quipped, where the man was asking for the matter to be transferred from place A to place B. And in place A, the woman was staying in place A, and the man was staying in place B. He was saying the last time I'd gone to place A for my trial, I was beaten up by the cousins and by the brother and by the family. That is a very strong ground for the matter to be transferred. But the judge said, Mister, you are at the liberty to go and file an FIR. Go file an FIR the next time they beat you up. This is the judicial bias.
And FIR से भी क्या होने वाला है?
Even if they file a FIR, it's just going to be another FIR.
Absolutely.
And there are many FIRs that have been filed. Like in this matter which I was doing in Jodhpur, another example of judicial bias, I'll tell you. Another example. I was arguing this matter in Jodhpur High Court, and when I pointed out, one of the allegations against my client was that he has been asking for money from my family. To negate this particular view, we had shown certain transactions where where my client had been sending a lot of money, he had been doing a lot of bank transfers, and he was supporting the girl's family because the girl's family was in some severe losses. She was facing severe losses during COVID,
Okay.
after COVID. So he was the one who was supporting her family. So the judge said, but these are normal financial transactions. Now, can you imagine if this was the other way around? If the girl had to send this money to the guy, this is dowry. This is the way the laws are functioning, the courts are functioning. And it is very difficult getting out of that judicial biasness. And we desperately need reforms at this stage, where the law is going to be more even, where even the men will have an even playing ground.
You were mentioning about judicial biases. Can you explain this term for the audiences?
See, judicial biases is generally when the judge thinks that only one person is right.
Okay.
He doesn't think that the battle is even. He thinks that if the girl has come ahead with a complaint, she has to be right. Whatever she has said is considered to be gospel truth. And if at all the man is innocent, it will be finally be proved at the end of the trial. So even when there are certain factors which on the face of it show that this could be blatantly wrong, they tend to negate that, they tend not to look at it. And that's the example what I gave you. But these are normal financial transactions. Only because your husband, only because your client has sent money to the girl, that doesn't mean that he cannot ask for dowry. That is the general view.
Right.
And there were a lot of other factors which we argued before the court. Finally, we had some good order. But then again, when we also argued on the question of alimony, when we argued this particular point of where she had sold her shares, the judge said that, now that she has sold her shares, you have to give her some money. And that time, my client was frustrated. He says, I'm not an ATM machine.
Right.
And this is all arising out of judicial biases. If the judge had to say that he cannot be your ATM machine all your life, you are educated, you yourself a lawyer, because the girl herself is a lawyer. If the judge wouldn't have been biased enough, he could have simply said that now that you finished your shares or you've sold them off, now you can earn for yourself. And that does not happen, because they generally think that whatever the woman has stated in a complaint is gospel truth.
Right. In fact, on Instagram, there was a clip that got viral a couple of months ago, where a female judge, and it was really, really pleasing to see this, that the female judge, when it came to the discussion of alimony, she in fact did fire the woman, saying that, this is not right. And I think the alimony amount was 30 lakhs per month. And she did say 30 lakhs. So, आपका survival का cost ही यार अगर आपका 2 लाख है या 3 लाख है, what are you going to do with those 30 lakhs? So that, yes, certain cases are certainly there. But yes, that the number and the percentage has to really increase in that case.
Of course. And Aditya, the problem is also this, that in a country as diverse as India, as large as India, we have laws, it's in the sense of, one size fits all. If you typically go up in the north, women are still subjugated to a lot of violence. But that may not be the same case that's happening in Bombay or somewhere up in the south, in Bangalore. I do not hear of these cases happening so much. But in the north, yes, that are rampant. So either of the laws, which are in favor of protection of women, they should not be repealed. But neither the laws which are favoring men, even they should not be. In fact, we don't have laws that favor men. And that is what now lawyers have started saying, that now we need to have laws which can favor, if not favor, at least balance them.
Right.
We don't want anything in our favor, but we at least need to have laws that are more even, and where, the battle can be more even in a way.
I was discussing, with another of my guests during the discussion on POSH. She did mention that POSH is now evolving into a more gender across kind of an act, where it will not be only for women. It will slowly, start even taking problems of men into consideration, even the third gender into consideration. The question here is that if there is a crime that happens now against a man, now these kind of cases do happen against a man as well. If this happens against a man in a patriarchal society, how does a man go and first of all open up कि मेरे साथ कोई crime हुआ है?
Men are stigmatized when they make complaints, when they come before the court. When they say that, I've been beaten by my wife, I've been tortured by my wife, or I've been tortured by my in-laws, they are stigmatized. We still have that concept in India, मर्द को दर्द नहीं होता है. It's all false. It can only be shown in movies. The reality is even men are equally vulnerable. And it's a high time that the society does accept that even men do have a certain side to them. They cannot be strong all the time, and they do not have to maintain that stiff upper lip all the time, which is expected out of Indian men. It is impossible. I'll just give you an example of what you said. Now there's this new section under the BNSS law, section 69, where the man is going to be charged for rape if he does not marry the woman he had promised to. Now that is one law. Now just look at how biased this law is. If a man does not marry the woman, he is going to be charged under section 69, but do the vice versa. If the woman does not marry the man, he has got no legal recourse. Where do we go? And relationships can break over a number of reasons.
True.
They can break over a number of reasons. The relation over time can get sad, or whatever the reason may be. There can be innumerable reasons. But if at all a man today breaks a relationship, and if during that period there has been a promise to marry, that I'll marry you, but subsequently if he realizes that this girl is not the same what I was when I had met her, and down the line, if the relationship goes bad, and in that case he just decides that he wants to walk out of the relationship, what is the next thing? The woman has the power to go and file an FIR, and then again he's going to go and end up defending himself. That is the problem. The law was made as a shield, to protect women, but now it's become an assassin's weapon.
Now, a couple of moments ago, we were talking about helping out such men, coming out and to be resolute, to be firm on their ground, and not giving up. What role do NGOs or such government agencies, if there are, who help these kind of men by giving them consultations or by speaking to them, offering them help? What kind of a role do these agencies play in such cases?
Aditya, to be honest, I haven't really come across many NGOs who are doing this work, and even if they are, I'm sure they'll have a lot of limitations. Ultimately, the adjudicating authority is going to be the judge. The people investigating cases are going to be the police, and the ones who are going to be appearing on behalf are going to be the lawyers. So ultimately, you end up being in the same ecosystem. So I'm not really sure how much of these NGOs can help. Yes, the NGOs can definitely help these men who are in such cases to the point of giving them psychological
Support, maybe.
Psychological support. That is definitely one thing.
Yeah.
That they can definitely do one thing. They can advise them on certain finances, on how they can work their finances throughout the whole thing. That is another important thing. So yes.
Yes. Now, coming to a more recent discussion, I've done one episode on cybercrime and cyber frauds, where I covered financial frauds and how bank frauds happen through bank accounts and all. But one very important aspect which I did not cover, and probably now I would like to, is the online dating apps. Now, there has been a case of blackmail in 2017 on one of the online dating apps. I have mentioned these cases, but I'm not taking any names of those dating apps. Then there has been a catfishing scam in 2019 when again a man was targeted by a woman. Of course, it was a false case that time. A case of impersonation and defamation, which was in 2018. An online dating extortion case, which happened in Delhi in 2020. And then there was a blackmail and fake marriage case, which happened in 2021. Many such cases. These are just about 6 which I have mentioned. Now, we know about cases where the money is extorted by making false videos or all these things. But by consent, if somebody goes onto a dating app and people hook up on this, how does a man really fight against that? Or if you could explain those cases with some examples.
First thing I would really like to tell everyone is that if at all you are on a dating app, learn to save all your messages. Get screenshots of all the messages because they'll be extremely helpful if at all you find yourself at the legal, if you're going to be charged ultimately. those messages will really help you a lot, because that will only go to show the court that this relationship was consensual. That is number one. Number two, very important thing, do not place implicit trust in the person on the very first meeting. Meet that person, get to know the person. Do not share everything too fast, especially your personal details. I've heard a lot of cases. There was a recent case where this person had come to me, where he had shared his own intimate pictures with that girl and he had not even met her. He had shared his intimate picture and the girl started blackmailing him. And he ended up giving almost close to 10 to 15 lakhs. Ultimately, I told him the first thing you should have done is gone to the police station and you should have filed a complaint. But men do not do this. For whatever reasons, either they are married, they are either cheating on their spouse, or they don't want their parents to know, or they don't want to be stigmatized before the society.
Correct.
They don't want their friends to know. There are a number of reasons. We can go into it. But the thing is, the first thing that they need to do is they need to go to the police station. They need to get the FIR filed through a lawyer. Why I say through a lawyer? Because the police just do a jumbled up job. They are just as inefficient as they always were. They just make these common statements in the FIR, which frankly do not come to the rescue of men or the complainant. That is the other thing. So that is something that they really need to do. And once the police officers, once the complaint has been filed, then the normal investigation takes place. You have to give your phone, a panchanama is done, all the messages are recorded, all the messages are stored by the police officers, then the normal investigation begins. But the first step, and that is the most important step, that you need to accept and you need to come out and you need to inform the police. You just cannot go on giving 10 and 15 lakhs to the other side. And this is something that has become extremely common nowadays. You should not be sharing any of your details too soon. Get to know the person, spend a lot of time, and then get into all of these things.
Right.
But unfortunately, that doesn't really happen.
So here, what I understand is, of course, first of all, meeting the person, getting to know the person is one part. But unlike in typical, cyber crimes, where somebody is contacting you through WhatsApp or maybe a Facebook Messenger or some other application, and then recording those kind of intimate pictures of you and then blackmailing you. Here, in this case, on a dating app, you see a photograph, you see a person right in front of you. Once the scam has happened, and if the person is not a real person himself, how does the police then take an action on this?
No, in that case, it's going to be a very, very lengthy investigation. It will be a very lengthy investigation, because what normally these people do, they just use this particular number only for one particular crime. They use
Correct.
this SIM card.
Correct.
They'll dispose of that card. Then the police have to go on a hunt. Unfortunately, the police are loaded with so many matters. They are under-equipped, they are underpaid. So firstly, you have to pay the cops. That is the unfortunate reality. For your investigation to even begin, you have to pay these cops.
Correct.
And that is what has been happening. And then once the investigation starts, if you are lucky enough, the accused will be caught. Otherwise, but the only thing what you can do is, at least, or you can go to the High Court. You can go to the High Court, file a writ petition. In such a case, you can at least ask, that certain channels be blocked. If the video has been, if at all the video has been filmed and it has been circulated, then you can approach the required court and then you can ask the required government agencies to block that particular video.
And does this really happen?
It happens, but it takes a lot of time, unfortunately.
Okay. So what is the time frame that it requires usually?
A week or two at least. Nowadays, to get through the High Court in itself takes a lot of time, because there are a number of matters even listed before the High Court. So that is the first hurdle that you have to come on. Number two, once, if at all your matter has been heard, once the directions go, another week or so. But these matters have to be considered on urgent footing. They are very, very important, because they concern the privacy of any person.
Correct. Now, typically when these kind of scams happen, for both, I'm saying, for men as well as for women, what kind of red flags could be there, which could be identified right at the beginning, so that we avoid getting into these kind of traps?
Number one thing, there is no display picture.
Okay.
Display picture, that is one thing that is generally not there. Or if there is a fake picture, and you can easily make out a fake picture.
True.
You can easily make out a fake picture.
Correct.
That is number two. The person on the other side getting too friendly too early, then she or he, starting to talk about finances too early, asking for sympathy, gaining sympathy in some way or the other. These are common red flags. Unfortunately, for whatever reasons your inclinations to be on the dating app are, you need to safeguard yourself against all these things. But people don't. They just lose sight of the whole common sense and they start giving out too much of information too early. But like as I said, these are some of the common red flags that can be observed.
Right. So how different are these online dating app scams than typical extortion cases which happen? How different are these two cases?
Well, they can be clubbed. I mean, like in extortion cases, extortion is just one section that can be applied by the police officers, along with several other sections under the IT Act. You know, they are very different. They'll all be charged together. They'll all be taken together, and they'll be taken up for hearing.
Okay. Now, see, this is when we are talking about see the urban cities where people have information, where people are exposed to some kind of support here and there. Let's say we go back to the rural side where people are not really aware. ठीक है, developed villages Maharashtra के हैं जहाँ पे of course information has reached, but there are certain places even in Maharashtra or outside Maharashtra where information is not available in that abundance. So in such cases, how do people approach for a legal aid? Because वहाँ पे तो courts या lawyers इस तरीके के नहीं होंगे. So they will not be aware as to कैसे होना चाहिए. How does somebody then approach here? क्या होना चाहिए उनका?
See, Aditya, if your question is with relating to online particular thing, I'm not very sure.
Not online. I'm talking about across.
Across.
Yeah.
See, they have to, if at all they go to the rural side, even in rural side, they'll have to approach a lawyer. Even if they don't get the best of the lawyers, they generally go to the legal aid society. The legal aid society is just as bad as it was before. That is the unfortunate part. They're being highly underpaid. So the lawyer's motivation to work, that is the first thing that, that is one of the major reforms that we need to bring in. That, we need to strengthen the legal aid where, the people who are highly marginalized, who are the most poorest, come from the poorest sections of the society, they are also being equally represented. Till we don't bring about all these changes, I'm not sure how are we going to fix all these problems. And like you said, you're raising a very important point. We are talking only about the urban cities. What about the rural places? In rural places, the representation is so poor. There are a number of reasons. There's a lot of language barriers.
Yeah.
That is one thing. There is a lot of stigma. They don't even understand whether should we even go and approach the courts. That is another thing. So there are so many things that need to be taken care of and need to be taken into the correct perspective.
Right. So people who cannot afford, suppose there are many cases where because of too much of time that has been spent in those cases, financially the person has lost a lot of money, or the person at the beginning itself was not financially very stable but got caught into this trap. What are those low cost legal measures अगर कोई ऐसे available है तो?
Unfortunately, law doesn't really come that cheap. That's the reality. It doesn't come that cheap. Lawyers nowadays, especially in urban cities, they're pretty expensive. In Bombay, if you go, lawyers charge per appearance, and rightly so. Because they have to leave their entire set of cases for that one day only to appear in one particular case. So that is one thing. Low cost, like as I said, you need to strengthen the legal aid society, which has not been strengthened for a very, very long time. Naturally, the motivation of the lawyer to represent the marginalized society is not going to be a lot. They're going to say, हमको इससे क्या मिलने वाला है, वैसे भी कम ही मिलता है, कुछ काम नहीं तो चलो लीगल एड ज्वाइन कर लेते हैं. That is the reality. And that reality, it is literally staring in our face nowadays, because the number of people that have not been represented, there are a lot of people.
Right.
So unfortunately, I don't really see where does this whole system go.
Right. So, we are doing this episode to create only the awareness in this case. We are not, trying to cast any kind of a judgment onto this. How do we really, create more awareness? How do we really, make more and more people aware about their own rights, their own, the remedies that they can get in these cases? How do we make that thing happen?
See, the first thing that, in such a case, I think the best thing that you can really do is consult a lawyer.
Yeah.
Because, consulting a lawyer will really bring down a lot of your, you'll at least have a clear guidance as to where is the case headed. Nowadays, a lot of people, they just go up on Google and they just come to the court and they have these ideas that, अरे हम तो खुद आए हैं कोर्ट में, हम कर लेंगे, बट इट डजंट वर्क दैट वे. इट रियली डजंट वर्क दैट
नहीं
वे.
ये बात सही है, बिकॉज मैं थोड़ा सा इसमें इंटरप्ट इसलिए कर रहा हूँ बिकॉज in case of medical issues also, people go on to Google and they think they're doctors.
Yeah.
Similarly.
Exactly. That is exactly what happens. They just Google, how do I
Yeah.
get myself out of this,
Yeah. Yeah.
See, lawyers, doctors, they have not wasted 5, 6 years of their life
Correct.
just like that, studying the law and medicine.
Correct. Correct.
They are there because they know it. But unfortunately, it doesn't. Many a times, these people, the clients do come and they, हमने तो गूगल पे ऐसे पढ़ के आए हैं, आपको क्या लगता है? That is also another thing that is nowadays taking place,
Mm-hmm.
But they need to be aware, firstly they need to consult a lawyer, they need to know their rights. Once they get to know their rights, then they can form a strategy with a consulting lawyer. These are things that have to be done. And that is the only way out. Then there are a lot of NGOs. I believe there are a lot of NGOs who are doing this work. We can follow up with these NGOs if at all, there is, then there is local guidance at many places. The government or typically, in smaller places, they should hold something like what we call, Shibir in what we call in Marathi.
Marathi, yeah.
They should hold something like that, where they understand what their rights are. These are at the grassroots level also, these are things which are very important. At the urban level, where you can have a social kind of a club, social club or something of that sort. You can have these kind of conversations or this podcast, which is going to reach out to a lot of people and people will definitely come to know where they stand today.
Right. In fact, I personally feel at rural levels, this kind of Shibir concepts really need to be there because one of the most important points, which I had discussed in case of Posh as well, is the stigma. The fear that लोग मेरे बारे में क्या सोचेंगे. And this stigma is not there only in case of men. Yeah, unfortunately, ladies के case में भी है.
Absolutely.
Because people are quick to judge. So these kind of training modules or these kind of shibirs or camps or groups, local groups have to be there to train people. So as we move towards the closure, what are your closing remarks as to what are those checkpoints that we should now keep to ourselves?
There are a lot of things, to be honest. Like, online dating scam, like as I said, do not give too much of information too early. Be on the guard. Take the time to meet the person opposite to you, the opposite person. You need to know that person in advance. Spend a lot of time. Then engage with that person. Finances. Keep them to yourself. Do not disclose a lot about your finances. It's too early, If you think, the other person is trying and gaining sympathy, it's a big red flag. This is something in online dating cases that I can tell you. In cases of marriage, in cases of this thing, you have to be very practical nowadays. Practical in the sense, I'll tell you why you need to be practical. If you refuse to pay your wife whatever alimony or whatever amount she's asking for, you're ultimately end up going to spending that on lawyers, and you're also going to end up spending a lot of time in the courts. That is number one. Number two, keep your finances. You need to safeguard your finances, especially when you're buying properties in each other's name. If there is a co-ownership, that is something that also needs to be looked into. You have to be very, very vigilant when all these things are done. Because you're paying a lot of stamp duty, you're paying registration fees, all these things, how much you have contributed to the flat, all these things have to be balanced. All these things have to be they have to be checked, and you have to maintain a record of all these things. So be on guard. See, today the relationship is hunky-dory. 10 years down the line, it may not be. So these are things that you definitely have to keep in check. And you have to safeguard your interest at all times. Once you enter the legal battle, you have to be resolute enough to wait and, to hang in there and wait for the judgment. And like as I said, number of reforms that need to be brought in,
Towards this end, I'll just ask you one question. I had seen one video when this Atul Subhash case had happened. Prior to the marriage, now of course, marriages, we think we think about marriages from an emotional point of view. जोड़ियाँ वहाँ से बन के आई है, all those things. Let's leave that aside for some time. On a practical note, can there be some kind of a contract or can there be some kind of a document the wedding?
See, prenuptial
Yes.
marriages, prenuptial contracts have not been given that recognition in India.
Right.
That is the whole thing,
Yes.
We have not been given in India. But now it's high time we do introduce something kind of a prenuptial contract.
So is it there right now or is it
It's
not
not.
there?
It's not.
It's not
It has
there.
not been recognized in India. It's out
Okay.
there in the US, from what I believe.
Mhm.
It's out there.
Okay.
And unfortunately, today the bride and the bridegroom, the bridegroom, they have to understand. They just want a wedding. They don't want the responsibilities that come with a marriage. For them, the honeymoon is all about the destination. It's not about the time they are going to get to know each other. That is the difference that I see. Like there was this case, very recently, I had this case where, the bride had come to me and she started complaining right from the word go that he didn't even take me to the destination which I wanted. And the quarrels began right from there. I mean, now these are very, very small things. But then, they ultimately snowball into something so big
Yeah.
that they have to come up and end up being in the court.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I said, nowadays everybody wants a big lavish wedding, but they don't really want the responsibilities that come with the marriage.
Right. But I think it's very, very important for us to understand these things. This is not across, I mean, I'm not trying to, limit this to any one particular generation. This is, of course, across everybody, across generations, across age groups, across professions and geographies. This entire discussion, once again, I'm saying, is not to cast any kind of judgment or any kind of the law that is pertinent in India. We just want to try and make people aware about what kind of legal remedies or legal recourses are available in case some kind of a false acquisition or a false crime happens. Because if you look at the previous episode of POSH, which I had discussed about, I still want to mention here that at least about 2 to 3% cases are there which could be fake. Now, in a population of 150 crores, you can imagine what a 3% number would look like. So that's the reason we have done this episode. If you liked this entire episode, this discussion, please share this with maximum number of people. Do comment and tell me कि कौन से और टॉपिक्स हैं जिनके ऊपर मैं बात करूं. मैं उस तरीके से आपके लिए गेस्ट यहाँ पे लेके आऊँगा. एंड लाइक करिए इस चैनल को, शेयर करिए इस वीडियो को, सब्सक्राइब करिए एंड प्रेस द बेल आइकॉन फॉर मोर अपडेट्स. And thank you, Harshwardhan, you came on this episode.
Thank you so much.
After almost about 25 years.
It's been the longest time.
Longest time, and we used to sit in the classroom as in our school days, and that time was very different, and this is a very different kind of an environment which I am really enjoying with him. And great, we'll interact more
Thank you
on
so
different
much.
topics.
I'm really thankful to you, and it's been a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.